Welcome to MSL Stories. Friends, if you don't mind, please subscribe to my channel. I have a dream of 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. Let's start the story. Intuition is rarely wrong, and for me, it wasn't subtle. It screamed at me every time Ophelia laughed too hard at her phone or worked late one night too many. At 31, I'd built my life on discipline and reason. As a cybersecurity consultant, my job revolved around identifying vulnerabilities, patterns, and anomalies. Ophelia, my wife of 5 years, was a vibrant 29-year-old PR specialist, known for her infectious laugh and natural charm. Together, we were the textbook definition of a successful couple, or so it seemed. From the outside, our life was enviable. A modern loft downtown, no children yet, but talks of starting a family soon, and weekend getaways that filled our Instagram feed with couple goals moments. But even the most picturesque lives can hide fractures. Ours did, and it all began with the name Damon. Damon had entered Ophelia's orbit a few months back during a high-profile client pitch. "Damon's got such brilliant ideas," she'd said after that first meeting. Over time, his name became a constant in our conversations. "Damon thinks the campaign's trajectory could use more edge," or "Damon's been helping me fine-tune the strategy. He's a genius." I brushed it off initially. A confident husband doesn't obsess over a name. But even confidence has its limits. I started noticing things. How she'd tilt her phone away while texting. How her laughter seemed lighter when she read his messages. How her work-related emergencies piled up. Always involving late nights and always accompanied by Damon. Still, I said nothing. Call it naivety or call it denial. I trusted her. Or at least, I convinced myself I did. That changed when her best friend, Celeste, called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Celeste wasn't one for pleasantries, and her voice that day was grave. "Liam, I need to tell you something, and I hate being the one to do it," she began, her words measured. "Ophelia's been spending time with Damon, and I don't mean work-related time." My stomach nodded, but I stayed silent, letting her continue. Celeste had seen them together, laughing and holding hands at a rooftop bar when Ophelia was supposedly at a client dinner. "I thought you deserved to know," she said softly before hanging up. I didn't rage or collapse. Instead, I went numb. That evening, I observed Ophelia as if she were a stranger. Her words seemed rehearsed, her smiles hollow. When her phone buzzed again, she didn't even flinch as she set it face down on the counter. The confirmation was clear. Now it was time to act. But this wasn't going to be a reactive mess. It would be methodical, just like everything else I did. People often think revenge is impulsive, a heat-of-the-moment decision. For me, it was anything but. That night, after Ophelia went to bed, I sat in the living room, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room. My thoughts weren't emotional, they were strategic. Ophelia and I had shared everything, but I knew her secrets would reveal themselves if I just followed the right threads. First, I focused on her phone. I'd installed a cybersecurity app on both our devices months ago, ostensibly for safety, in case either of us got hacked. In reality, it granted me full access to her texts, calls, and emails. Within minutes, I had what I needed. Their messages weren't subtle. Damon wasn't just her colleague. He was her confidant, her escape, her thrill. They made plans, shared inside jokes, and spoke about me in the kind of dismissive tone that only confirmed my decision. "Damon, he doesn't even notice, does he?" Ophelia, "Of course not. Liam's too wrapped up in his own world, and honestly, I'm not sure I care if he does." I closed the laptop, my jaw tight. If she thought I was oblivious, I would give her more reason to believe it. My advantage was her underestimation of me. The next step was financial. Ophelia and I shared a joint account for bills, but I'd always kept my investments and savings separate. I didn't have to dig too deeply to see how she'd been using our shared money to fund her outings with Damon. Dinners at expensive restaurants, last-minute business trips that aligned suspiciously with Damon's conference schedule. It was all there, and I documented every penny. Our marriage wasn't just built on emotional trust. It had legal boundaries. A prenuptial agreement ensured that in the event of infidelity, the guilty party forfeited their claim to shared assets. It had been her idea when we married, a way to protect us both. Now it would become her downfall. I spent the following weeks consulting with lawyers. I didn't rush. Each meeting sharpened my plan, and each piece of advice they gave me bolstered my case. Meanwhile, I played the part of the oblivious husband. I asked about her day, made dinner, and even listened to her talk about Damon as if he were just another coworker. What Ophelia didn't know was that I wasn't acting alone. Celeste, horrified by her friend's betrayal, became my inside ally. She started sharing more details, times, locations, even photos of Ophelia and Damon together when they thought no one was watching. "I feel terrible, Liam," Celeste said during one of our calls, "but she's doing this to herself." Then there was Damon. He wasn't some faceless interloper anymore. He was a target. A quick background check revealed he was married, with 2 young kids and a picture-perfect family life. His wife, Harper, was a school teacher who, based on social media, adored him. I felt a pang of sympathy for her. She didn't deserve this any more than I did, but sympathy wasn't going to stop me from doing what needed to be done. I reached out to Harper anonymously, sending her screenshots of messages and photos of Damon and Ophelia together. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Within a day, I received a reply. "Who are you? How do you know this?" I kept it brief. "A concerned party. I thought you deserved to know." Harper's pain wasn't my goal, but I knew it would set off a chain reaction. Damon wouldn't just lose his standing at home. He'd lose his veneer of control, and that would make him sloppy. I wanted him to be sloppy. The final piece was logistics. Ophelia wouldn't know what hit her when the time came, but I needed everything to be seamless. I changed the locks on the apartment and redirected her mail to her parents' address. I packed her belongings carefully, not out of kindness, but to avoid any legal complications. Every detail had to be perfect. I wasn't acting in haste, and I wasn't relying on luck. I was building a trap that would collapse all at once, leaving no room for her or Damon to maneuver. I'd given her enough time to come clean. Now it was my turn. The morning it all came crashing down began like any other. Ophelia left for work with her usual routine, a quick kiss on my cheek and a distracted, "Don't forget to pick up the dry cleaning." I responded with a smile that hid the storm brewing behind my calm exterior. She had no idea this was the last time she'd walk out of the apartment as my wife. As soon as the door clicked shut, I set everything into motion. I emailed her boss, attaching a summary of her out-of-office meetings that I'd meticulously tracked using the shared calendar she thought I never looked at. Damon was CC'd for good measure. Professional environments might tolerate many things, but this kind of indiscretion, especially between colleagues, wasn't one of them. Next, I finalized the delivery of her belongings. The moving company had strict instructions. Everything packed and delivered to her parents' house by noon. I'd even included a handwritten note for her mother, politely explaining the situation. I didn't expect her family to take my side, but I wanted the message clear. This wasn't a rash decision. Ophelia had made her bed, and now she would lie in it. By mid-afternoon, I received confirmation from the building management that the locks had been changed. I left a small envelope taped to the door with her name on it, containing the divorce papers and a single line written on crisp white paper. "I know everything. Good luck." The real fireworks began at her office. By 3 p.m., Ophelia's phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts she couldn't ignore. I knew this because Celeste, my unlikely ally, kept me updated. The HR department had called her in for a meeting. Damon, who had been in a client presentation, was also summoned. The whispers in the office spread like wildfire. 2 co-workers caught in a messy affair, one of them married to a man who clearly had receipts. When Ophelia finally called me, I let it ring twice before answering. I wanted her to feel the weight of anticipation. Her voice was shaky, her usual confidence replaced by confusion and panic. "Liam, what is going on? I just got pulled into a meeting about inappropriate conduct. Did you do something?" "I simply connected the dots," I said evenly. "You should have been more careful with your texts." She stammered, trying to find an excuse, a defense, but I cut her off. "Don't come home, Ophelia. Your things are already gone. The divorce papers are waiting for you at the door. This conversation is over." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, but I didn't wait for her to find words. I hung up, feeling no guilt, no second-guessing. This wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. The dominoes continued to fall. Damon, for all his arrogance, had no plan for the fallout. Harper didn't just confront him, she dismantled him. A teacher with an eye for detail, she'd already compiled her own set of evidence before I reached out. When the HR scandal erupted, Harper filed for divorce immediately and demanded full custody of their kids. I heard through the grapevine that Damon had to move in with his brother after being suspended without pay, pending an internal investigation. Ophelia tried calling me again that evening, then texting when I didn't answer. Her messages ranged from furious to desperate. "How could you do this to me? I was going to tell you, I swear." "We can fix this. Please, Liam, talk to me." Fix this? The irony almost made me laugh. I didn't respond. Her pleas were as hollow as her promises of loyalty had been. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with my lawyer and wrapping up loose ends. Ophelia, predictably, tried to fight the prenup, but her attempts were futile. The evidence was airtight, and the clause was unambiguous. Infidelity meant forfeiture. The court sided with me, and she walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and a reputation in tatters. Celeste called me one evening to check in. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better than I thought," I admitted. "It's liberating, honestly. Like I've shed dead weight." She laughed softly. "Well, if you need a drink or a distraction, let me know. You deserve to celebrate." I appreciated her kindness, but I wasn't ready for celebrations yet. The wound was still fresh, but it wasn't raw. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't realized I'd lost: peace. The weeks following the implosion were quieter than I anticipated, almost unnervingly so. Ophelia had gone silent. The calls and texts stopped after the first week, which was a relief. I suspect she realized there was no salvaging the situation. Her pride likely kept her from showing up at the door, or maybe she was too ashamed to face the fallout. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned her professional life was in shambles. HR had terminated her employment due to the scandal with Damon. She hadn't even lasted through the internal investigation. A friend of Celeste's mentioned she was staying with her parents temporarily, though she was already looking for a new place. Damon, unsurprisingly, wasn't part of her plans anymore. Their connection, flimsy and superficial as it was, hadn't survived the pressure. But my revenge wasn't about her suffering. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring that I wasn't the one left picking up the pieces of her betrayal. That said, I couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing she was paying the price for her choices. Damon, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale at their company. His suspension turned into termination once HR unearthed other skeletons in his closet. Unprofessional conduct with more than one coworker. Harper, his now ex-wife, had been swift and efficient in cutting him out of her life. She kept the house, full custody of their kids, and, according to Celeste, had even landed a promotion at work shortly after the divorce. For a man who thrived on his image, Damon had been reduced to nothing more than a punchline. Celeste and I joked about it one evening over drinks. "You might have ruined him even more than Ophelia," she said, raising her glass. "I think you're officially the most dangerous man I know." I smiled but didn't dwell on it. Damon and Ophelia's downfall was collateral damage. What mattered was the clarity I'd gained about myself, my values, and the kind of life I wanted moving forward. Despite everything, I wasn't bitter. The betrayal stung, yes, but it didn't define me. In some ways, it was a strange sort of blessing. It forced me to reevaluate my priorities, to confront the ways I'd settled for a relationship that wasn't as solid as I once believed. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects and even consulting for a nonprofit organization that focused on cybersecurity for small businesses. The work was rewarding, and the people I met were refreshingly genuine. My evenings, once spent trying to navigate Ophelia's increasingly erratic moods, were now my own. I took up running again, something I hadn't done in years, and joined a local book club. It wasn't about filling the void, it was about rediscovering the things that made me happy. Celeste and I stayed in touch. At first it was practical, updates about Ophelia, strategizing about the legal process. But as the weeks turned into months, our conversations shifted. She'd call to share a funny story from work or text me a meme that made her think of our situation. I found myself looking forward to her messages more than I expected. One evening, she invited me to an art exhibit. "It's nothing fancy," she said over the phone, "but I figured you could use a night out, and I promise it won't be awkward. Strictly friendly." I agreed, though I suspected there was more to her invitation than just friendship. And to be honest, I didn't mind. Celeste had been my ally in one of the darkest periods of my life. She knew the mess I'd been through, and yet she didn't treat me like a victim. She saw me as someone worth rooting for, and that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. The exhibit was small but charming. We wandered through the gallery, commenting on the art and laughing at our own interpretations. By the end of the evening, it felt natural to suggest grabbing dinner. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, Celeste opened up about her own struggles, failed relationships, career frustrations, and her complicated friendship with Ophelia. "I guess I always knew she wasn't stable," she admitted, "but I never thought she'd go this far. When I saw what she was doing to you, I couldn't just stay quiet. I hope you don't think I was out of line. Out of line? I shook my head. You were the only one who told me the truth. Without you, I might have stayed in denial forever. She smiled, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than pain. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was hope. And that was enough. Months passed, and life began to settle into a rhythm I hadn't realized I'd missed. My days were my own again, no longer overshadowed by doubt or betrayal. The legal battle was over, the paperwork signed, and Ophelia was officially out of my life. The scars of her betrayal were still there, but they didn't define me anymore. I was finally free. I hadn't expected Harper, Damon's ex-wife, to reach out to me, but one evening, I found an email from her in my inbox. It was short and to the point. Liam, I just wanted to thank you for the information you shared. I'm not sure I'd have had the strength to leave Damon without it. If you ever want to talk or meet up, let me know. Harper. I hesitated at first. What could we possibly have to talk about? But curiosity got the better of me, and a week later, we met at a quiet cafe. Harper was every bit as composed as I imagined, though there was a weariness in her eyes that mirrored my own. We exchanged stories, filling in the gaps of each other's experiences. I don't know how I didn't see it, Harper admitted, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. Damon was always so charming, but looking back, the signs were all there. I think we see what we want to see, I replied. I ignored my gut for months before finally confronting the truth. It's easier to believe the lie than face the pain. We talked for hours, not just about our exes, but about life, work, and everything in between. By the end of the evening, Harper looked lighter, as though sharing her story had lifted some of the burden she'd been carrying. You know, she said with a small smile, maybe this mess was a blessing in disguise. I've learned more about myself in the last few months than I did in the last 10 years. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what really matters. Meanwhile, my friendship with Celeste continued to deepen. What had started as a partnership of necessity had evolved into something far more meaningful. She wasn't just an ally anymore. She was someone I genuinely cared about. Her wit, her honesty, her ability to see through people's facades, all of it drew me in. One evening, after another casual dinner, Celeste surprised me with a question. Do you ever think about what's next? Like, really think about it? I leaned back in my chair, considering her words. I think about it a lot, but for the first time in years, I'm not rushing to figure it out. I just want to take things one step at a time. She smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. Good answer. There was no pressure, no expectations. Whatever was happening between us was organic, unforced. It was refreshing, a stark contrast to the tangled web I'd just escaped. As for Ophelia, I heard snippets about her now and then. She'd moved out of her parents' house and was renting a small apartment in a less-than-ideal part of town. She was working freelance, struggling to regain the footing she'd lost. Part of me wondered if she regretted her choices, but I never reached out to find out. She was the architect of her own downfall, and I had no interest in rebuilding what she had destroyed. One day, Celeste mentioned running into her at a coffee shop. She looked different, Celeste said carefully. Not bad, just worn down. She didn't say much, just asked how you were doing. I told her you were fine. How did she react? She just nodded. I think she knows there's no coming back from what she did. I didn't dwell on it. Ophelia's life was her own now, just as mine was mine. The turning point came on an unassuming Sunday afternoon. I was sitting on the balcony of my loft, a book in hand and a rare sense of contentment washing over me. Celeste called, her voice warm and teasing. You're not still sulking over that book club argument, are you? I laughed. Hardly, I just don't think crime thrillers are my thing. Well, we'll have to work on your taste, but hey, I was thinking. Want to grab dinner tonight? My treat. Only if you let me choose the restaurant this time. Deal. It wasn't a grand declaration or a dramatic moment, but it didn't need to be. Life was moving forward, not in leaps and bounds, but in steady, deliberate steps. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was excited to see where it would lead. Thank you, friends.